the issue is that you have at this point still no political real unity to tackle complex solutions. I think that's worse. I mean, by the way, about democracy in general, I think politicians for the last 20 years have lived off the easy money policies of central bankers, because then anything goes back, central bankers come in. Central bankers, in my mind, have also gotten simply too powerful because of their permanent interventions. We are now in a phase where literally, we just saw it this summer, right? Jay Powell says neutral, and we got a 20% rally.
Right.
He says pain, and we drop, massively on the stock market. I mean, do you want to be in a situation where one person has that much power just by what he decides to say one day to the next?
Well, not at all. And sorry to interrupt, but you raise a really important point here, which is in that environment, you can't be an investor. You're forced to be a speculator. You're just forced to guess what's the next thing that Powell is going to say, because that overwhelms every other part of the market action.
That's why the machination between technicals and what's happening on liquidity and financial conditions in context of the mission is so important to understand. So when you see a rally like we just had in mid-June, it goes to key resistance points where everybody's bullish again. You mentioned earlier about positive technical signal. I thought the technical signals were horrible because they're massively jammed overbought. We had negative divergences, and we approach key resistance points. If you expect this just to continue, you got to know when you're wrong, right? And so for us, it was just lightening up, scaling out, and then when we got to these points, it's purely try some shorts here, because that just simply from a technical perspective didn't make sense. It also didn't make sense from a macro perspective. What was really better? Why was Apple all of a sudden flat on the year based on what? And based on everything that's going on the fundamental basis, no way, no how, right? So and likewise, if we get some larger pullback again here in the fall, we'll be flexible enough to again push for a long positioning if the signals tell us to do that. You can't be perma anything in this environment. You can be a hero chasing up Bed Bath and Beyond from 10 to 28.
And then from 28 back to 9 in a couple of days.
Knock your socks off, but know when to leave the party, right? I mean, that's just common sense, I would hope, but it's the problem is we're not only subject to central bankers, but we're also subject to conditioned behavior over the last 14 years. So markets, it's been long said, markets can be irrational longer than you can remain solvent. So our opinions really don't matter. It's just what matters is how we can identify the pivots and the drivers of the market at any given time. Going back to the original question, though, with structural reforms, it's tough. I'm really worried that the democratic system as we know it is becoming increasingly ineffectual in being able to deal with complex solutions. Mm-hmm. We see it across the world. I think in the United States is probably as bad as I've seen it in my lifetime. People like to blame all kinds of factors, including social media. I get my own share of, people going at me like they wouldn't if they were to meet me face to face. Right. There's this kind of perceived safety filter. You can talk to anyone you like without consequences. But I think it's just a reflection of the fact that the middle class has been shrinking for 40 years. We keep telling ourselves we're in the greatest economy ever, but it's really not working for a lot of people. And we have no accountability at all from those that are benefiting from these type of policies. I can argue on the positive side, global poverty has improved over the last few decades, but it's still terrible, and you cannot have a long-term functioning society with a shrinking middle class. It's just not going to work. I think it was good that they helped out people with stimulus checks, those that needed it, but then I saw them also throwing out millions to PPP recipients, businesses that didn't really need it, or that got full loan forgiveness about this. I think that's sending the wrong signal as well. And then in general, if you look at right now, for example, it's fascinating again, how much money is going into buybacks as opposed to CapEx. These companies are throwing more into buybacks than CapEx.
Okay.
And look at the last few crises. Companies, take airlines, for example. Airlines that spend billions and billions and billions on buybacks
Got bailouts.
but got bailed out, because that's the message. If you're running a business, you got to be at least be prepared. We all personally responsible have to be prepared for a crisis, an unforeseen circumstance. We got to be able to handle something terrible happen. So we need to have cash reserves to do that. But these policies that have been played out over the years have basically sent the message, you can be as reckless as you want, because ultimately someone's going to bail you out. And guess what that has created? It's called a zombification of the economy. It's like close to 25% of the companies on the Russell 2000, is it, or Russell 3000, are zombie companies. They have more debt obligations than what they throw in terms of results.
Right, which is why cost of carry is becoming so important right now, because it could be the conflagration that takes them all out.
Exactly. Yeah, because that shoe is still to drop, as these rate hikes filter through the economy. And guess who's going to get hurt?
Well, certainly all the employees that work for those companies, but
exactly.
The taxpayers who fund the bailouts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, would Emperor Sven make buybacks illegal again, like they used to be?
I think buybacks, I have generally no problem with it. I mean, it's a free society. They're free companies. They can do what they want. But I would make it very clear, there would be, if you do buybacks, go knock your socks off. But you're not going to get any bailouts whatsoever. And in fact, maybe I would say, if you want to do buybacks, you can do it under certain conditions, meaning you have built up enough cash reserves, in terms of being a viable company. We are not going to bail you out. We don't want you to become a systemic issue.
Yeah, exactly. Because the airlines are a good example. They can sort of put a gun to their head and say, well, hey, we were reckless, but you don't want your airline industry to go away overnight, right? And so you may want to put some guardrails in place there. If you enjoyed this video clip, click here to watch another one you should like.